Yeah. So again, I mean, this is a topic about depression. Now, before I talk about depression, I just wanted to emphasize one thing that even when we're talking about any kind of topic in mental health, and especially speaking, in relation to the immigrant population, perhaps, I am looking at the screen here. I think a lot of us, we belong to the group of ethnic minority. One thing that we want to understand is up until this day, I think in our society, there's still a very huge stigma around the issue of mental health. Meaning, I don't know what you're feeling about this morning, as long as we talk about the topic of depression, I don't know what you're thinking in your head. Some people may be thinking, well, I haven't really experienced depression before, or this is not a topic for me, or, this is just for people who are mentally ill, for example. Now, this is false assumptions. What we know is the fact that depression is one of the most serious pandemic um, in the world right now. I'll be talking about some statistics, as I'm going through this presentation, but I just want everyone to recognize that there's a huge idea, the stigma around mental health within immigrant population. That whenever we talk about mental health, people seems to be scared, right? They don't know what to do about it. And partly because of our culture, because perhaps we didn't really grow up in a culture where mental health was really talked about. As I'm looking at the screen here, there's quite a bit of perhaps age difference between myself and the audience here. And I imagine back in your time when you were growing up, the notion of mental health, and I'm just assuming it was really never talked about. It wasn't really taught in school. It wasn't really talked about, among your peers. It wasn't really talked about by your parents, but that doesn't mean that it does not happen. Okay, so as we approach this presentation this morning, I wanted everyone to approach this with kind of an open mind, trying to learn about what depression is about. At the end of the day, depression is really like one of the, it's a mental health condition, which I'm going to talk about, but it's also nothing different than perhaps just a physical illness, right? For example, you're talking about a cold, you're talking about a heart disease, you talk about kidney disease, and sometimes we can talk about the physical diseases or illnesses, but nobody talks about mental health well-being conditions. And this is what I really want to address, and I'm going to use it in a language that is very simple for everybody to understand. It's nothing complicated, just to talk to you guys about what depression is. Now, before I start the presentation here, I just want to get a raise of hands here. How many of you have been happy in the past 2 weeks? How many of you did feel happy in the past 2 weeks? Raise your hand.
Can you repeat the question?
How many of you did feel happy in the past 2 weeks? Did anybody feel happy?
In the past week, did you say?
In the past 2 weeks. Lily, you did?
Yes.
Lily, you felt happy? Okay, you felt happy?
Yes.
Oh, you felt happy? Vincent, you felt happy?
On Saturday.
On Saturday. Okay. How anybody else felt happy in the past 2 weeks? Yeah. But I'm just gonna go across the screen here. I can't see every one of you. Yeah, I see a hand here. Good. And yeah, Fatah, is this your name, Fatah? Yeah, I can see that you felt happy. Good. Now, let me ask you another question. How many of you have felt always happy in the past 2 weeks, like every day happy?
您能打出来吗？把字母打出来。
打出来。
对，因为我们的英语不是很好。
哪一位讲话？
朱莉呀。
哦，朱莉，11点的时候是广东话的，普通话的是12月幾多號啊？8號啊
？12月5號。
因为这个题目是很重要的，所以我们三个
语言都有啊。你等我一下， 如果是国语的话，国语呢就是在12月7号11点，也是 Marcus 来讲的。
对，
所以如果是你听不太清楚，你也可以在12月的时候再听，
对，
他说的
好吗？
OK，
可以。Yeah, so thank you. 講國語嘅朋友，我會12月嘅時候再做一個 presentation，OK？咁廣東話嘅時候咧，我11
一
點
陣間
再多一次嘅，OK？And for those who are speaking in English, sorry about the confusion. There's different people in our group that speak different languages. One of the things that we know working in immigrant population is, I'm very used to that. So I'm very used to switching my languages. Now let's go back to the topic here. How many of you have always felt happy every day in the past 2 weeks?
I wish.
Yeah?
I
Okay,
wish.
there's one gentleman. One gentleman always happy. What about others? Every day happy. We're talking about in the past 14 days. Every day happy.
Who is always happy?
There's a gentleman who raised his hand.
Oh, sometimes it's boring because cannot go out,
I know.
It's
I know.
boring.
Marcus,
Yeah.
just to reply more accurately to you, can I ask one clarification?
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens that for few hours or for half a day, you become very low because of some adverse news or
Yeah.
because of some adverse reaction to someone
Yep.
to whom you not react in the same manner. So instead of you be quiet and be low almost half day or a few hours, and
Yeah.
then you reactivate yourself by involving in some other activities and you become again be happy.
Yeah.
So that half day or a few hours in which you become very low or your mood become very slow, it would be considered unhappiness,
Mhm.
or you can count yourself happy for a whole week.
Okay. Yeah. So you have time, Patami, when I asked who is always happy in the past 2 weeks, you raise your hands, but you did admit that there was some time in the past 2 weeks or even some hours that you were not feeling happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were not always happy then, but most of the time you're happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then my reply will be most of the time.
Good. So I am just looking at the screen here. It looks like there were some of you in the past week that has been happy, but very few of you said that I'm always happy all the time. Now, when I flip the question, let me ask you a little bit, and understanding that this conversation is confidential, okay? It's a very small group here. I want everybody to keep things confidential here so that we can feel safe to share, okay? How many of you in the past 2 weeks have felt unhappy? In the past 14 days, did you feel unhappy? Not every day, but sometimes. Raise your hands, please. Yeah, some of you felt unhappy. Most of you, I would say. Most of you felt unhappy at least perhaps once in the past 2 weeks. Am I correct? Now, let me ask you another question. How many of you have always felt unhappy in the past 2 weeks? Always. Now I know somebody's speaking, but somebody's also on mute on the mic. So let's put up your hands. How many of you were always unhappy in the past 2 weeks? Nobody.
Nami, were you trying to say something?
Sorry?
No, I'm just asking Nami whether she was trying to say something. She said no.
Yeah, I saw Nami speaking, but her mic is mute. Okay. Nami, yeah,
I'm sorry.
no worries.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'm not happy always. Yeah,
You're not always happy.
I'm unhappy.
You're unhappy. Is that sometimes or always?
Maybe yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. Okay, that's good. Now, whether or not, thank you, Nami. I mean, whether or not you felt always happy, sometimes happy, sometimes unhappy, or always unhappy, I want you to pay attention to this presentation. Okay, and I like all of your participation because this is exactly what we're talking about today. When it comes to depression, I'm talking about, the area where people are often feeling always unhappy. Okay, so when it comes to depression, this is what we're talking about is when somebody is going through a time that is always unhappy in their lives. Okay, now, although you may not feel this way, and congratulations that you're not feeling this way, I am sure if you think about within your family or among your friends, there is gotta be someone whom you felt is always feeling unhappy. That, when you think about this person, I don't know why they're always sad. I don't know why they're always unhappy. I don't know why they have low energy, right? Even though this may not be a topic for you, I just want to stress that this may be a topic for your family and your friends, just to understand a little bit more when it comes to what it means by depression. Okay? Now, when it comes to depression, we know that depression is a mental health concern. Okay? Now, in psychiatry, they talk about this as a mental health or as a mental illness. So it's somebody who is getting sick psychologically and mentally. And when somebody has depression, depression is simply a term. I mean, if you want to understand that in a very simple term, it means that somebody is unhappy for an extended period of time and they cannot get out from the struggle. It's not just being unhappy though. I'll talk about the difference between being unhappy and depression. Depression is completely different, okay? But if you want to understand it very simply, depression is a mental health concern and is a common mood disorder, okay? Meaning that it affects our mood, okay? Whenever we have depression, and I'll talk about the symptoms a little bit later, but whenever we have a depression, or whenever we have depression, we experience the changes in our mood, okay, which is always negative. We lose the interest and the pleasure in the stuff that we do, okay, every day. For example, we used to enjoy quite a bit of things previously. Now we don't enjoy that as much. For example, you like to play chess before. Now you don't like to play chess. You like to exercise before. Now you don't like exercising. People are often feeling guilty, okay? They feel very bad, for example, about themselves, about their world, about people around them, and feeling very sad about everything. The other thing is low self-worth. It's not having a positive idea about themselves, that I'm feeling low, I'm feeling I'm not worth it, that I'm feeling I'm a bad person sometimes, right? So this is different than being just sad, because when you have these feelings, and when we really have these feelings, what is gonna do is it's gonna affect how our body is functioning. Okay, so there's a physical aspect to depression as well. For example, I've noted on the PowerPoint, it says, when we're having depression, because we're struggling a lot in the head here, okay? And there's a mental health condition that is resided in the head, okay? And then it started to affect our body. For example, our sleep get disturbed, okay? We have difficulty going to sleep, okay? People who have depression often find themselves having a hard time to go to sleep. Or when they fall asleep, they have a hard time to kind of sleep through the night, for example. They wake up multiple times, and when they wake up, they can't go back to bed. They feel very low energy during the day, and they're lacking concentration. Okay, so when you think about depression as a mental health condition, it's really not just in the head. Perhaps it really started in the head. It makes me feel very low and very down and very negative about my life. However, it is going to transpire and it's going to affect how your body is functioning every day. So I would say depression is actually a mental health condition, but there's a lot of implications in terms of how it can affect our mental health as well. Okay. Now, as I said before, depression is also just different than just a bad day. It was interesting when I asked all of you in the past 14 days, most of you felt like you had a bad day. Now, some people talk about, when somebody talked to me, I feel mad and I feel bad, and perhaps it's just a bad day. So some of you would have felt, in the past 14 days, there were some bad days. But also others are also saying, yeah, there were some bad days, but there were also a lot of good days as well. Now, if you're able to think that way, congratulations, right? Because you're able to understand that, yeah, life is always about bad and also about the good. You have the ability to think both sides. For people who have depression, unfortunately, they have no way to think about, however, there's any kind of positive things that are going on in their lives. That life can just not be positive for them. Okay? So again, the difference between depression and just a bad day or unhappy is depression can actually start at any time, and it can also last for a long time. So unlike somebody said previously, I have a bad day, after I went to do some exercise, I'm okay. I eat something good after, then I'm okay. But depression is different. It stays with you, okay? And it seems like you cannot get over it by yourselves and you need some help. Now, when you think about depression this way, you're like, oh my God, Marcus, I'm scared really about depression. It sounds really horrible. Not only does it affect my mood, because when depression comes into my life, I feel low mood. I feel like I'm different, right? And the scary part is, I really have no idea how I can help myself to think negatively, because when depression comes in, I cannot seem to think positively about my life at all. Now, having said that, does anybody have any questions so far about this? This is just the basic about what depression is. Any questions? Feel free to speak up.
Is it depression and anxiety the same thing? The symptoms are almost the same.
Yes. Now, May, you asked a very good question. Depression and anxiety, they have their overlap. Okay. Now, for anybody who wants to understand what anxiety is what we call nervousness. We always feel worried and we always feel nervous. Okay. Depression is kind of different though. Although in depression, you do feel worried. Depression is, anxiety gets you to get nervous. So your mood and your activity actually goes up. It's an uplifting mood disorder, while depression brings you down. Depression makes you feel low and sad and demotivated. Anxiety makes you feel very unsettled. Like no matter what I do, I'm still very nervous. The symptoms have their overlap, but when somebody has anxiety, right, they just feel like they're not themselves. No matter what they do, they're not right, that kind of idea. Okay, and they're always nervous about something. Okay, depression is somewhat different. It brings you down. You're low, you're demotivated all the time. However, they do overlap. Okay, so from time to time, we do see people who are struggling with anxiety on one hand, but also with depression on another hand. And that's more difficult to treat clinically when you speak about it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
They
will treat them differently?
We use different interventions to help the client to understand, which I'll talk about in the intervention piece later. But we treat them slightly differently, right? Just depending on what people are coming in for in counseling. Okay, so just something for you to remember again, depression is very different than a bad day. Now, this is what it captures, what depression looks like. Imagine you have Monday to Sunday every day, right? In a healthy, normal human being schedule calendar, Perhaps today is Monday, you have to go to work, you're feeling stressed. This is what we call them almost a mood journal. Monday, people are feeling stressed, so they have a face like this. Tuesday, they're doing better because, it's Tuesday the work day, so they're not feeling as bad. Wednesday, they're not feeling bad. Thursday, something happened, they feel sad again. Friday or Saturday and Sunday, perfect, because the weekend is coming. I don't have to work, so you're feeling better. Okay? Everybody feels sad sometimes, right? Just by a show of hands, we understand that. Now, with depression, this is what your calendar looks like. Unhappy, 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 unhappy times 7 within the week. Now, if you find yourself, and this is what your mood calendar looks like, okay, you will have to pay more attention to this presentation, and I do recommend that you talk to somebody after. Okay, now this is the difference between feeling sad and feeling depressed. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, depression is like feeling sad and down and low every day. Okay, now I just want to talk a little bit again, between the difference between depression and sadness. Okay, now when it comes to sadness is a very normal feeling. Now I just wanted to emphasize, if you feel sad, congratulations. Why, Marcus? Because this is actually a pretty normal, common experience in humans' lives, right? We feel sad, we feel happy, we feel mad, right? We feel angry. We have a lot of normal reactions in our lives, and sadness is just one of them. Nobody can live your life without having some kind of sadness. And if we don't experience sadness, we don't know what happiness looks like, okay? So sadness is actually pretty normal. When something bad happens to us, we feel sad. Now, sadness and depression have similar reaction. They cause similar reaction. It makes us emotional. It makes us down. It makes us low, okay? However, again, depression, in terms of the duration, depression lasts a very long time. Depression affects somebody's mood. It can also cause us to feel drained. Again, not just mentally drained. Mentally, like your brain is tired. Oh my God, I'm constantly sad and I'm worrying about different things all the time. I worry and I think about everything negatively. Okay? Then our mind is drained, our body is drained. Okay? And it can cause you to feel down. How long, Marcus? Well, sometimes we're talking about for weeks. Sometimes for some people, we're talking about for months. Now, for people who are more severe, it can be for years. Now, you imagine the power of depression. Imagine you feel sad one day, and imagine the difference between you feel sad one day, and then for 1 week, and then for one month, and then for 1 year. It is very, very different. So for somebody struggling with depression, they feel that for an extended period of time, okay? Again, sadness doesn't last very long. You eventually get over it. Like the gentleman at the beginning said, I eventually get over it. Again, for people who have depression, they cannot get over this sadness, okay? Any questions about this?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Actually, referring back to your last diagram, which was very good, where you depicted when you have 2 sad days out of 7, that's normal, right?
Yeah.
But when you are sad 7 days a week, that's when you need to be careful, right?
Yeah.
What if you are sad 5 days out of the 7?
Oh.
So majority, not every day sad, like majority, you are, yeah.
Now that's a good question. Now, this is not absolute, right? The question is, how long are you feeling sad for 5 days out of 7 days? Is it just 1 week? Is this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks, like that? So if you're talking about 1 week, yeah, I'll pay attention to that. How come that 1 week I feel stressed? I feel sad for the 7 days, right? Maybe something bad really happened to you. Then you feel sad for the 7 days. That's absolutely normal. But if you feel sad for 5 days out of the 7, for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, then we may want to talk about it. Because when it comes to depression, there's different ranges as well. Okay, it's not like, yes, you have depression, or no, you have depression. It's like, yeah, you have mild depression, you have severe depression, you have moderate depression. It really depends on people's experience, right? So we're looking at the duration. How long are you feeling this sad for 5 out of the 7 days? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense.
So it's not just a 1 week thing.
Mhm.
We have to see, throughout, for example, in the past month or whatever. Okay. I just wanted to talk about how do you know that you have depression then? I mean, what are the symptoms look like? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think about depression. Forget about depression first. Let's say you get a cold or a flu. Okay, like you get a cold today. What are the symptoms that you have when you get a cold? When you get a
Breathing.
cold, how do you know you get a cold?
You have this runny nose, stuffy nose,
Yes, running nose, stuffy nose. What else?
body ache.
Body ache. Yeah. What else?
Tired.
Tired. Yeah, feeling very tired. Yes. Now, when you get a cold, you know you get a cold when you sneeze, when you cough, when you get headache, when you're tired. Then you're probably thinking, yeah, I'm getting a cold. Now, this is the same idea for depression. Meaning, I mean, how do you know you have depression? Is you have to pay attention to the symptoms. You have to know, well, when I'm struggling with any of these, then I may want to pay attention because maybe my mind is getting sick, right? Or maybe my mind is really getting sick, like my body getting sick with a cold. My mind can be sick as well. Now, these are some of the common symptoms of depression here. For example, we're talking about persistent sadness. Persistent means like always, okay? Like, it's here all the time, okay? Very consistent. I'm feeling consistently anxious or I'm feeling empty. Empty means like, what does it mean by empty? What do you think? What do you mean by empty feelings?
Empty is nothing.
Yeah, feeling nothing. Great, Jerry. So feeling nothing. So feeling nothing can also means like, I don't care. Okay. Feeling nothing can also mean like, or I just don't care about anything. So sometimes I have people telling me like I have empty feelings. I'm apathetic. The term in English is called apathetic, meaning like, I just don't feel. I just don't feel anything. Okay. Now that could be a sign as well, like feeling very down, empty, no purpose, for example. Okay, would be one of them. Now, the other thing that I want you to remember is feeling hopeless. Okay, hopelessness is one of the greatest symptoms of depression. That no matter what, I can have a bad day, but I can be hopeful. Okay, that things will change. But people with depression, it's like, I'm having a lot of bad days, and there's no way that my situation will change in the future. That's what people feel when they feel depressed. When you have a family or a friend, when they talk to you about this, I feel very hopeless. I want your ears to perk up a little bit and pay attention. Okay, I have no hope things are not going to change in the future. Pessimism is what we're talking about, like opposite to being positive. Okay, or optimistic. Feeling very guilty of themselves. Now, again, when you talk to people with depression, you may want to pay attention is people are feeling very bad about themselves. Okay, not just about the world, but they feel very bad about themselves, that I'm a bad person, that I'm not good enough, that no matter what I do, I'm not good enough anyways, right? That kind of idea. Okay.
So Marcus, when I hear these symptoms, I think the person is actually feeling very bad because they don't see any hope and they don't care about anything. So will these people commit suicide?
Yes, I will talk about that. Now, suicide is perhaps one of the things that we're looking at. Okay. at the end of the day, it could be a symptom or it could be a presenting sign of depression as well. Not all of the people who struggle with depression have thoughts about suicide, but some of them do, okay, which I am going to talk about later, okay? Now imagine if you're in this situation, you're feeling hopeless about your situation, you're feeling bad about yourself, that no matter what I do, I'm never good enough, I'm worthless, okay? I don't have a purpose here. And the other thing that people are talking about is nobody can help me. Nobody, absolutely nobody can help me in my situation. Now, these are the red flags when people are saying, my future is hopeless, right? Nobody can help me. Then you kind of get a sense, yeah, this person is depressed. Now, this is very different than a bad day again, than just feeling sad. Now, the other thing that I want everybody to remember is depression is not just about being sad. In some people, depression can present as being mad, okay? Like angry and irritable. Now, this is what we see in a lot of men, especially, that for some reason, I mean, when we compare men to women, and I don't want to stereotype here, but traditionally, men don't, and they're not taught and they're not trained to talk about their feelings, okay? Like, you know, it's in our society, there's often this, men are not encouraged to talk about how they feel. And men don't often know how to discuss feelings with others. And what we see in men is when they experience depression, sometimes we see anger in them. We see them being very irritable, okay? Very agitated, okay? Like, you know, for example, a lineup in Tim Hortons, right, in the morning, and when there's a lineup, I feel very angry. I am losing patience. Now, this could be one of the things that we're looking at is, well, they are not used to be like that, but they're getting more irritable. Stuck in traffic makes you irritable, okay? Makes you want to have road rage. Now, that could be a sign that people are getting depressed as well, okay? They may not be depressed at first. I mean, they may not be mad at first. They can just be sad, and then they're mad. Now, the other thing that I talked about, the loss of interest, I want you to pay attention to that as well. Thinking about there's stuff that I used to enjoy, I don't anymore. But these are things that I really, really liked before that for some reason I can't seem to do it. I do not have the energy to do it. I do not have the motivation to do it. I feel tired, decreased energy. Now, the other thing that I didn't put here is the notion of lack of motivation in depression. Okay, that you cannot seem to be motivated to do anything in your life, that everything becomes very difficult. Something as simple as waking up. I have had people who tell me, Marcus, I find it very difficult to wake up every day. When I ask them why, they said, because I have nothing that I look forward to. Obviously, this person perhaps is depressed, right? Now, depression can affect you a lot, really, okay? From your mind to your body. Difficulty concentrating, think about when you're in that state, it's really hard for you to concentrate as well or make decisions, okay? Now, the other thing that I want to talk about quickly, again, in terms of sleep, people with depression don't usually sleep very well. They either sleep very little or they sleep a lot, okay? Because they're very tired or they're just constantly worried they can't sleep. Sometimes they overeat, okay? They eat a lot, or sometimes they don't eat either. It affects their appetite, okay? Now, again, physical manifestation of depression. Now, thoughts of suicide or suicide attempt. Now, let me ask you a very good question. Do all people who have depression think about suicide? The answer is no. Okay. Do some of them think about suicide? Yes, some of them do. Imagine if you're depressed, or imagine if your friend is depressed, and imagine these are all the things that they're going through, and they're talking about, I've nothing to look forward to in life. I think less things are not going to change. Of course, people think about what's the purpose of me being here today or in the future, really. Then they think about ending their lives. However, what we know, and it's very important for you to know, is people don't often want to end their lives. They just want to end the problems. Does that make sense? Yeah, they have a lot of problems going on in life. They just want to end the problems. They do not really want to end their lives. Okay. Any questions about this?
Marcus, I have one question.
Yeah.
I'm just curious that is drug addiction related to the depression?
Yeah.
Depression can lead to the drug addiction?
Yeah. Drug addiction is I wouldn't say they're friends, but they really affect one another. Okay. Now, from our perspective, what we know is when somebody who has depression, the role that the drugs play is actually people use that as a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
People use drugs to cope because they're very unhappy, and for some reason, they think that by taking this drug or drinking, for example, using alcohol, it can bring them some kind of relief, right? It can
They will feel
temporarily
better. Yeah.
bring them some kind of relief and help them to feel better.
Yeah.
That they can escape the sadness for a while. But what we know is after they drink and maybe they get a little bit of high and relief, things are never changing. It's the same. And what is worse is, they develop this negative coping mechanism that they have to rely on drugs, like on we talk about substances, not good drugs, substances and alcohol to help them to cope, only to find out that is really not helping them. If anything, it makes them more depressed and sad. Right? Now that they develop addiction as well, so they have two different enemies. One is depression, the other one is almost addiction or substance or alcohol. Does that make sense? So they do supplement one another. Okay?
Yeah.
Now,
thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is body discomfort is also another one. Now, from time to time, if you go to your doctor's office, you talk about, hey, doctor, I'm constantly feeling stomachache, cramps, and especially any kind of digestive problems. Okay? Like, I don't eat well, or I get stomach all the time, and your doctor did all the tests for you and wrote everything biologically that is abnormal. What we know is people who have depression often have a lot of unexplained pains and aches and discomfort, and especially in their digestive system as well. There's a connection between your brain and obviously those system that we know when we're feeling unwell, then our body does feel unwell as well. Okay, so a lot of unexplained. Unexplained means there's no, like, the doctor can't really find out the causes of your pain. The doctor can't explain. And sometimes they ask you, are you very stressed? Are you very sad? And that could be one of the symptoms as well. Okay, now it's also important everybody experience depression differently. Okay, so when you have depression, doesn't mean that you have all the symptoms, then I have depression, or I've just one or two, I have depression. It has to be assessed by a professional. Okay, but everybody experience depression differently. Some are sleeping okay, some are eating okay, but they still feel sad all the time. Some have suicidal attempts or thoughts, some don't, right? So everybody experiences differently. Any questions about this?
But
Yeah. Is somebody speaking?
Wait, I'm looking. Jerry, did you want to ask a question? Was that you?
I think it's Pao.
Power.
But then she just speaks shortly and then.
Okay. Kyle, are you asking questions?
No, I
Oh.
just greet my father, you know. Sorry. Yeah, he just wake up, so I said,
Okay.
So I just
Okay.
sorry about that.
I have one question, Marcus.
Yeah.
Max,
Yeah.
I'm Jerry. I have a question.
Oh, okay.
I understand that today's talk about depression.
Yeah.
Depression is really important for everyone.
Yeah.
Especially for seniors.
Yeah.
Because during this COVID-19 and
Yeah.
it's really because I'm sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's long term. Maybe it's depression.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for everyone, especially for seniors, is every day very, very happy. But
Yeah.
how to do?
Yes.
How to
No,
do?
Jerry,
This is a question for me.
it's a very good question.
Thank you.
I have included part of the presentation just specifically focusing on senior and depression later in the presentation, because I do recognize a lot of us, we're aging, right?
Yeah.
We're at a point where perhaps we're retiring, we're stuck at home all the time. So I will talk about that at the end of the presentation here, is the connection between senior and depression. Now, senior is definitely a vulnerable population to depression, okay? And for reasons I'll talk about later. So Jerry, if you can kind of keep your questions to the end and pay attention to what I'm going to talk about at the end, I hope that you find your answer, okay? Okay, just hang on here, okay? I'll come back to you later in the presentation. Shazia, you have some questions?
I was just considering like what age, what population is more at risk for the depression.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Good.
think you will talk about that later, right?
Good. Yeah, I will talk about that later. Now, good question. Instead of talking about which kind of population is more at risk, we know every population is at risk. Okay. It's just they have different risk factors depending on their circumstances and depending on their age. Okay. We see depression in children and youth.
Yeah.
We see depression in teenagers. We see depression in young adults. We see depression in adults like my age, 30s, 40s, 50s. We also see depression in older adults and then seniors. It's across the board, okay? And it's just different population in terms of age have different kind of risk factors, okay? Now, age is just one factor. We're talking about educational background. We're talking about socioeconomic background, whether you have money or no money. Let me tell all of you, it does not matter. Depression affects everybody. Some people think, well, you have a decent job, you make decent money, you have good income, you make a lot of money, you have a beautiful house and a beautiful car. What's the reason to be sad? Now, that's not a good question to ask, because we know when it comes to depression can affect everybody, no matter how much you make, okay? Or no matter how little money you have, depression can still affect you. It's like asking the question, well, you make so much money, why are you getting a cold? I talk about the cold. Well, people get sick. It doesn't matter how much money they make, right? You know, so you have to understand that you don't ask people, well, why are you getting sick? Why are you getting a cold or a flu when you make so much money? You don't do that. Same thing with depression, right? So simple to understand that way. Just Shazia, thank you for your question. Now, there's some types of depression can affect different people. I'll talk about in this slide. What we know, now this is very important for everybody to remember. As I said, depression affects just anybody. The rich and the poor, men and women, young or old, doesn't matter. They have different risk factors though. However, what we know is depression often strike people most often, like we talk about, when are we usually getting mentally sick, is when a person is going through changes and or stress. This, when people are going through changes in their lives, what we know is depression can likely develop when people are especially going through changes. What kind of changes are we talking about, Marcus? Well, we're talking about a bunch of different changes. For example, you're moving houses.
Yeah.
You have a different boss. You have a different job. Okay? Maybe you're going through a divorce. Okay? Maybe one of your family member is sick. Maybe. So we're talking about a lot of different changes. When people are going through changes, depression, if we don't know how to manage that properly, or for example, if we do not have enough tolerance for change. Now, this is very important. If we do not have enough tolerance for change or uncertainty in our lives, we're more prone to depression. Does that make sense? Now, everyone has a different personality here. I want you to check into yourself. Do I have enough tolerance and skills to cope with change? How am I coping with change? Am I a flexible person, or am I a very inflexible person? I hate change. I can't deal with change. Change drives me crazy. Some people are like that, right? Some people are like, yeah, I think I can deal with change. I'm a flexible person, right? And also depending on the changes you're going through and stress as well. Okay? Now, I just want you guys to remember that changes are often, the period of change, often when people feel uncertain about the future, having doubts about themselves and the future and people around them, and that's when depression has the chance to develop. Any questions about this?
Marcus?
Yes.
Is there any research on this topic, that how much the external factors drag the person to the depression, and how much person's own attitude is responsible for putting him in depression? Is there any research to assess the contribution?
Yep.
Thank you.
Now, there's a lot of research on depression. Okay, people can think about the development of depression in very different ways, depending on what kind of perspectives that you're operating from. You can talk about it from the biological perspective, okay, whereas they talk about the neurotransmitters failing to do their job or whatever. So the biological side of it. There are people who's talking about the social side of it and the environmental side of it, okay? Talking about, for example, poverty, okay? Talking about, let's say, COVID, external situations, like bad, stressful situation around us, causing us to have that kind of, to have the tendency to be depressed. Now, there's also another type of research that talks about, hey, you know what? To what extent do people's personality contribute to it? Like, for example, psychodynamic theory, they talk about, if people are more sensitive, for example, they're born to be, they're socialized to be more sensitive, right? They pay attention to the surroundings. Some people just don't care about what people say. Some people care about what people say about them to the bone, right? So there is differences with how, what we're talking about is depression is almost a combination of everything. It's really hard to pinpoint the causes of that, okay? There could be biological factors. There could be social factors. There could be environmental factors, okay? Like adverse situation in life, and then plus your personality regarding perhaps how you were being socialized, right? What skills were you taught to face hardships in your life, right? How are you able to tolerate uncertainty, ambiguity, and just the unknown in the future. They all make a difference in terms of how resilient that you are when you're going through depression. Does that make sense? So there's different perspectives to it. Now, some types of depression I'm talking about only affects some people. There are different types of depression. When it comes to change, for example, we're talking about, for one, I put it in the slide, it says postpartum depression. For those of you who know there's a pregnant woman in your family, among your friends, right? You may want to pay attention to that. For example, this type of depression affects women who have just given birth, okay? And it usually develops within perhaps 4 weeks after delivery, that people are starting, these women who have just given birth, they're starting to feel blue and depressed. It's normal for them to feel blue. Again, it's another change for you to have baby, for example. All of a sudden you become mom to somebody. You have a lot of responsibility, right? For women who have just given birth, what it also means to them, for example, is just they'll have to go on a maternity leave for a year. They'll have to be stuck at home. They'll have to feed the kids. They'll have to go through a lot of body changes. The body looks different, right? That, they have to stay up all night to feed the baby. So we're talking about a lot of changes. Now it can affect them as well, right? That way. So changes again. The other thing is we're talking about seasonal affective disorder. You're looking outside. We're all living in, I assume, Calgary here. You look outside, it's all white outside. It's cold and windy. The sun is not always there. It's always dark outside. So seasonal affective disorder means, when winter kicks in, especially for those of us who live in the north, right? That because it's always dark outside, we're not getting enough sun and not enough vitamin D, it can make us more prone to develop depression as well. And the darkness also means that there will be less opportunity for us perhaps to do exercises, right? That we normally do in the summer, okay? Then it can affect us that way as well. So depression affects a lot of different people to a lot of different extent, okay? Again, different people, for example, postpartum depression only affects women, obviously, and people who have just given birth, but it's always, always, always about change. Now, having said that, sometimes depression can be triggered by nothing at all, okay? But what we know is most of the time, depression is triggered by changes that we make, or that's changes that's happening to us, okay? Now, just very quick fact about depression. As I said at the beginning, you may not think that this affects me, but I'm pretty sure everybody in the room understands or knows somebody who is struggling with depression. We talk about 1 in 4 Canadians in their lifetime would develop a degree of depression that's serious enough that would require treatment of some sort. So one of us in the room, in the chat here, would have perhaps experienced something like this. It is pretty prevalent, okay? There's going to be one person within your friends and your family who struggle with this throughout their lives. Perhaps we don't know about it, or perhaps they just don't talk about it, okay? Again, depression can be triggered by a lot of different factors or nothing at all, and it can range from being mild, moderate, to major or severe. Okay, so there's different levels of depression as well. Now, what I also want to emphasize, I'm going to show a video after, but what I also want to emphasize is that the earlier that you recognize that you're depressed, the earlier you speak to somebody about how you're feeling or speak to your doctor and get help, the easier that it will for you to overcome depression. If you just wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, as I said, because depression is not something that you can get out of in your own life, or it's really difficult, I would say, then if left untreated, like if you're not doing anything about it, it can become more serious and more severe. Does that make sense? Like any kind of illness. You think about that example of a cold and a flu again. A cold and a flu is a pretty mild, perhaps, it's a pretty common illness. But if you left untreated, it can take your life. It can become very serious as well if you're not attending to it. Okay? Anybody has any questions? Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to show a video. This is an excellent video that I want to show you. This video is called I Have a Black Dog. Okay, somebody developed it, I didn't. And it says, I had a black dog and his name was Depression. And I just want everybody to kind of pay attention to the video a little bit. I'll try to see if I can click on the link here and share. And I want to pay attention. I want you to pay attention to what does somebody actually feel like when they develop depression? What's their life like? And I just wanted to come back to have a discussion about this. Okay? Would it work?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So let's see if I can do this here. Okay, before I start, can anybody see what's on my screen? Is there a video here?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna play this. It's gonna be about 4 minutes. So just pay attention. It's very easy to understand. It's just cartoon, okay? So I'll start the video here.
When you share your video, you need
I had a black dog.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
When you share your video, you need to use computer sound. Otherwise, they won't be able to hear the sound. But right now, I'm not seeing any video.
You're not seeing the video?
Am I the only one not seeing the video?
I don't see the video either.
Yeah, they don't see the video.
The video. Oh, okay.
Just a screen of the man sitting like. There's just a picture, not a video.
Just a picture. Okay. Let me give me a second, okay? What about this?
Yeah.
Do you see the video?
Yeah, play it.
Now see the video.
I don't see the video.
No, yeah, just play and they will see. Just play
it.
They haven't started yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do this. Do you see
I
it?
had a black dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever the black dog made an appearance,
Can you hear it, everybody?
life just seemed
Yeah.
slow.
No, I cannot see it.
Can you hear?
It surprised me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learned not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks. So it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants. So go for a walk or a run and leave them up behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learned that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, and he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
Okay. Now, is everybody back to the screen? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, wait. Sorry, give me a second. Yep. Good. Give me a second again. I will have to share my screen again. Okay. Okay. Now, I want to have a discussion with all of you about what you just watched here. Any thoughts, comments, or idea about what you just watched and the black dog? What have you learned in this video?
Can I share?
Yeah.
I think after watching the video, I realized that identification of the triggers, which are making you upset, and approaching for the help is the important part to cope with the depression.
Yes, that's a good point, Shazia. I mean, getting the help that you need. I mean, one thing that struck me, and I don't know if you thought about that, it's excellent that they use the black dog as an example, that when people have depression, they have this black dog living with them all the time. Like I'm talking about all the time. It's like it's very hard to tell the dog to go away until you learn some strategies, perhaps in counseling or talk to your doctor to kind of manage the dog. The dog makes you sad, down, and depressed, makes you feel like you're a different person than usual, makes you to fight with your partner, right? Makes you to turn to alcohol and drink, as the gentleman said, self-medicate. It is a very dark idea or experience to have. Anything that you've noticed or anything that you've learned about the video? From the video?
One thing interesting is that the black dog can be tamed.
Yeah, the black dog can actually be tamed. Okay, you can, without talking to somebody, for example, it's really hard to tame it. And this is why we have counselors here and psychologists and all that and doctors to help you learn how to tame that depression. And it's like having having dark and difficult thoughts all the time. But the skills is, I mean, it's not about, I mean, I'm sad that I have a black dog, or, you know, I'm terrified, I'm scared. I mean, the idea is, how do you learn how to cope with it as the questions? How do you learn how to cope with those negative, dark thoughts in your head, so that perhaps, you know, we learn so that it doesn't really affect us? Does that make sense? So this is sort of the experience of people going through depression. Is just they have a dog following them all the time, and the dog has nothing good to do and to say. It's just to demotivate you, saying that you're bad, saying nothing good about your life. Did somebody say something?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. Now, Jerry, you talked about depression and the elderly population. Okay, and this is the area where I want to spend a little bit of time talking about it. I can see on the screen, most of the people, perhaps, I mean, we're at that age where we're entering retirement, or some of us have retired already. The elderly population, what we know, Jerry, is, you know, depression in elderly people is often under-recognized or unrecognized at all. Okay, most of the symptoms that we talked about in depression, I mean, maybe you have a question about this. Well, the lack of energy, fatigue, you know, not being able to sleep or sleeping a lot more. Well, this is just a normal part of aging, right? Some people may have questions about this. Well, Marcus, of course, when I get old, I can't sleep. I can't seem to be sleeping as good as I used to, and all that stuff. I can't eat a lot, you know, my appetite changes. Now, what I'm going to talk about, depression is different than aging, okay? But depression in the elderly people often under-recognized for that reason. It's because when most of the older adults, when they come to the doctor's office, or perhaps when they come to counselors, they often complain about physical symptoms, okay? The physical symptoms more than the emotional symptoms of depression. They talk about perhaps getting aches, you know, body aches. They talk about not being able to sleep. They talk about not being able to eat. They talk about not being able to concentrate. Now, those sounded like, yeah, when we get older, I mean, these are the normal symptoms of aging. And this is what makes depression under-recognized in elderly people, okay? That, well, perhaps, yeah, you're getting old, and that's why maybe you're feeling this way, and that's most of the people's explanation, but that's wrong, okay? Depression is, as I will talk about later, depression is not a normal symptom of aging. Meaning, like, you can get old, but at the same time, you can still be fine and happy. Doesn't mean that when you get old, you're gonna get depression right away. But as I'll talk about in a second, the elderly people are prone to depression for various reasons. I just wanted to say very quickly, depression increases the risk of cardiac disease. Let's say if you have heart problems, it can worsen your heart problems. It can also increase risk following a heart attack, or any kind of, you know, the likelihood of death following any disease. Like if you have any disease to come in with on top of depression, it makes your prognosis worse, okay? So, and depression also increases the risk of suicide rate in people between age 80 to 84 has twice as much of a suicide rate than the rest of the population, okay? Now, this is concerning. One thing that we know is when people are aging, when they're getting older, their experience of aging is often accompanied with loss. As they age, there's been a lot of changes. As they age, they're really going through a lot of changes, okay, in their lives. And these changes are often accompanied with loss. When you age, people find that they do actually lose quite a bit. Not necessarily, right? But just by natural selection, they do lose quite a bit. So what makes the elderly population more prone to depression then? And these are some of the significant risk factors that I want every one of you to pay attention. You think about as we age, we're getting older, we have a lot more happen to us in life. We do experience what we call the emotional painful events in our lives. You think about as you age, sooner or later, our partner is going to leave us. Okay, one of us is going to go first, right? So we talk about the death of a partner. Okay, we're talking about perhaps close friends, even close friends, like friends that we have had for a long time, for 30, 40, 50 years. All of a sudden they develop illness and then they just pass away. So we talk about painful events like this, especially when it comes to losing a friend, losing a partner, losing a family member because of age. Again, we talk about change again. Any people who have past depression, okay? Any people, for example, who struggle with low income. For example, you're getting older and you struggle with bringing food to the table. Imagine that. And that's different than when you're young and you struggle with food on the table, you can still go and work. When you're older, it's different. So we're talking about life stressors when you're older and when you have low income and your basic needs are not being met. The decrease in quality in lifestyle and reduced sense of purpose. Now, this is very important. As we age, we find that, with our health and even with our mobility, all of them is declining. Okay, and that's a fact. I mean, that's just the natural courses of life is, when we get old, our health perhaps gets worse and our mobility, we're not moving around as good as we used to anymore. Okay, that contributed to a decreasing quality in lifestyle. Okay, that we can't go on trips anymore. We can't go on the airplane anymore. We cannot go on cruise ship anymore because it makes me dizzy, that kind of thing. And the reduced sense of purpose, especially for people who have just started to retire, and especially for people whose children are leaving home, right? They had a sense of purpose. They took care of the kids. Now the kids grown up. They're gone, right? Or they were working. They spend a lot of time in the job. Now they don't work anymore. They're losing that sense of purpose. Now, again, aspect of change, right? Disabilities and other limitations. Now, none of this, I would say, is as important as this. That's as we age. What I want everybody to remember, if you don't want depression to knock on your door, is that I will want, if I have this magic wand, I wish everybody can maintain some kind of social contact with other people. Social contact means there's a sense of belonging, like what we're doing this morning, or the MFC Foundation, like it's a place for you to kind of get together. Breaking social isolation is extremely, extremely important. We understand one of the most significant factors that contribute to depression is isolation. Jerry, you raised a very good point at the beginning. Because of COVID, I'm not just talking about old people, even young people. With COVID and the lockdown and the lack of interactions that we have had since March, makes people a lot more prone to depression. We have been seeing an increase in people coming in and seek for help because of that lack of social interaction. Now, I want to emphasize this. What's even worse is they have done a study about this. For people who are lonely and isolated, they talk about the harmful effect of isolation and loneliness, and they make it equivalent to somebody smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's the harmful effect of isolation. Like if you're constantly isolated, not talking to people, locking yourself in the home, you're feeling lonely. The effect of constant loneliness is the equivalent to somebody smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We talk about the health implications here. And the lack of interaction makes people to feel depressed. And Jerry, again, good question, as everybody is locked in the home right now because of COVID. We still, I mean, external situation, we can't change too much about it. We still have to learn and try our best to stay connected with others through different means. Now, let's say this morning, for example, we have about 10 of us in the meeting here. This is what we mean by gathering. If we can't really gather face to face, we have to learn how to interact and gather with others, even through the phone, talking to people through the phone, right? Talking to people online to ease that feeling of loneliness and isolation. Coming back to the senior population, even without COVID, this is a problem. The last thing that I want to do as a counselor is to see senior people getting isolated and have nobody to talk to, because it makes them age a lot faster, right? And when changes happen again, it makes them more prone to depression. I'm not saying that you're going to develop depression right away, but makes you a lot more prone because you're not talking to people. When you're not talking to people, our mind is stuck. Does that make sense? When our mind is stuck, I mean, it's a bad situation. Now, Lily, I am aware of time here. What time do I have until? 11 o'clock?
Yeah, the next group comes in at 11.
Okay, I'll be very quick about this. What I want to go through perhaps very quickly is to talk about when to get or where to seek help. Okay, I'm talking about if you're experiencing any of these, I'm just going to read these out. If you're experiencing any of these, and I think there's 13 items or whatever, then I want you to pay attention. For example, in the past 2 weeks, I feel worthless, helpless, hopeless. I sleep more or less than usual. I'm eating more or less than usual. I have difficulty concentrating or making decisions. I've lost interest in activities I used to enjoy. I've less desire for sex. I tend to avoid other people. I have an overwhelming feeling of sadness or grief. I'm feeling unreasonably guilty. I have a lot of unexplained stomachache and headaches. I feel very tired or restless. I'm feeling more irritable or tearful as usual. And I have thoughts of death or suicide. Now, what I'm talking about is if you experienced 5 or more of these statements in the past 2 weeks and these feelings lasted for more than 2 weeks, you may want to consider talking to somebody. Okay, doesn't mean that you have depression. This is not a diagnostic tool, but you may want to consider talking to somebody or anyone in your life that you find is experiencing anything like this. You may want to talk to somebody. Now, very lastly, I can talk, for treatment, I can talk about this later. There's one thing that I want to talk about that is very important. That even though if you're not somebody who's struggling with depression, as I said, you will know somebody who's going through this. You may ask, Marcus, how do I approach this situation? How do I talk to somebody about that I'm concerned about them? If anything, I want everybody to remember that you really, as a supportive friend or family member, you really don't have to do a lot other than just listening and be present for that person. Listening, I mean listening non-judgmentally. Okay, to the person, not judging, not giving advices, just simply saying that, hey, you know what, I am concerned about you recently because I see that you're different than most of the time. Just wanted to let you know, no matter what happens, I'm here for you. If you're struggling, I bet you're not alone. I'd like to be here. Tell me what I can do to help you. Instead of offering advices, and sometimes a lot of them, they're useless. For example, like, go to sleep, or for example, you think too much, or for example, have a drink, or for example, you're too weak. That kind of idea, you do not want to talk to somebody whom you suspect is depressed. You just want to be present and listen to others. Try to educate yourself about the signs of depression and encourage them to seek help. Now, lastly, what I want you to do is when you're taking care of somebody who's sad and depressed, you also need to take care of yourself as well. If you're not well, you cannot help others. Okay? You cannot help others go through their struggle either. Now, I am just going to stop here. Here's a list of resources. I mean, if anybody needs counseling, or if you feel like you want to talk to a counselor or talk to a doctor, you can talk to your family doctor, you can call HealthLink. Here's some resources, or here's some numbers that you call. The stress center is very good. I mean, for somebody who is perhaps awake at night and they're not sure who they can talk to, they operate 24/7. Calgary Counseling Center, same thing. Not 27, but they do receive people's requests for counseling, and there's no wait list, and it's very affordable as well. Older adult counseling at Caria. So there's some resources here. Feel free to reach out to perhaps either Lily or May if you have any questions about this. Now, before I end this presentation, does anybody have any questions